Why do we care about justice? We, like every society that considers itself evolved and equitable, consider justice a prism through which to view power. We care about justice because we know that police powers are vast, that judges wield intricate power over evidence and procedures, and that prosecutors decide which cases to bring, which to let slide, and which to plead out. We rightly tremble at these assembled powers. We also cling tightly to one of the best guarantors of justice, not infallible, but better than all other available alternatives, the jury system. Juries, you see, come in and out of the justice system. Juries have no axe to grind, no office to protect, no reputation to burnish. Recently, two juries in different places, considering different evidence and different laws, found a former president and the son of a current president guilty of felonies. That has never happened before. Of course, there will be appeals, but prison sentences, home confinement, probation, or some combination of these loom for Donald Trump and Hunter Biden. Juries decided that, not judges, not prosecutors, and the power of the presidency, fully visible to juries in New York and Delaware, did not dissuade or intimidate. A former president stared across the courtroom at the jury box for days. A sitting first lady did as well. That power came and left, and a verdict was rendered by jurors who saw past the power, the political preening, the ornaments of family prestige to weigh the facts and the law. What do we have in the aftermath? A prism into power and something more, a reckoning. Who acknowledges and accepts the verdict no matter how disappointing? Who assails and demeans the verdict and the very system behind it? That's for the political arena and our coming campaign, a place that, unlike the courtroom, makes ample room for hysterics, falsehoods, slander, and contempt. It has been said memorably, the courtroom is the campaign. Now, in more ways than one. Let's bring in our Weijia Jiang. She's in Wilmington, Delaware, and Robert Costa is here with me at the desk. Weijia, I know you're in Wilmington. The president has just arrived. Catch us up on the day at the White House and the day there in Wilmington as it is progressing this afternoon.
That's right, Major. President Biden changed his schedule after the verdict was reached so he could scramble here to Wilmington, Delaware, to be by Hunter Biden's side. As you know, as we've been reporting, many family members attended this trial, including the First Lady, who was here all but one day because she was in Europe alongside the president. And this has been a very difficult, painful chapter for the Bidens because it is on such a public display. After the verdict was reached, Hunter Biden left the court with the First Lady, holding hands with her as well as his wife. And you can imagine now they have to think about the sentencing and what comes next. To that end, President Biden has said he would not pardon his son. It remains a question whether he would consider a commutation, which means to shorten his sentence, which has, of course, not been given to Hunter Biden yet. The judge in this case said there is no date set just yet, but it typically happens about 120 days out, which would put us at early October, Major. And that would be, of course, just about 1 month before the presidential election. So, ironically, oh, go ahead.
We just stand by. I want to bring in Robert Costa. Robert, we were just showing video, very compelling video, just brought in of the president, Hunter Biden, hugging, and the president talking to the children, remainder of the family. This is a moment of tremendous import for the Biden family and an expression in this large legal/political context of the president's loyalties.
It's such a prism, as you said, not only into the campaign and American democracy, but it's also a prism into the Biden family. For the past half century, these two men, father and son, have been at each other's side, dealing with the aftermath and the pain of losing a wife and a mother, then later losing brother Beau, son Beau Biden. And it is just these two men left from the original Biden family as we knew it in 1972. And of course, President Biden went back to Wilmington tonight. So much comes back to Wilmington back to Delaware? Where does he celebrate Mass most weekends? In Wilmington or in Rehoboth on the Delaware beach? This is someone who has been president, but his friends always tell me he is most comfortable in Delaware, and he's also most comfortable with his family. And you've spoken to him over the years. I've spoken to him and interviewed him. This is someone who always talks about the Biden name. And it seems like maybe just something small in passing when you're covering a political figure, but not every political figure talks about their surname with such pride and reverence for what it means, the values they believe it represents. And to deal with a son who has had addiction issues, now dealing with a conviction, it's so serious for Biden, who has been with Hunter through the ups and downs and ups again and then the downs today.
And, Robert, it's worth noting that this trial laid bare things that were visible if you were kind of a student of Hunter Biden's problems, but now the whole entire public knows of it. This addiction problem manifested itself most malevolently for Hunter Biden in 2018. Not long after that, his father was making the most important political decision of his life, whether to seek the presidency 2019, 2020. And there were those in the Biden inner circle who wondered and worried about the implications of Hunter Biden's problems and what effect it might have either on Joe Biden or the campaign itself.
Well, as you recall, Biden waited so long to make a decision before he announced for the 2020 campaign, and so much of it was the family issue. And as we discussed earlier today on the special report, Hunter writes at length in his memoir about this intervention right before his father announces, just months before, where Hunter runs away, goes down the driveway, and his father chases after him. And anyone who's had an intervention in their family, they think about those kinds of moments, a searing moment in anyone's life. And for Hunter Biden, this is something he has always tried to juggle, being the son of a public figure. And that's why today it's actually interesting as a reporter to note the quiet across the political scene. So many political figures I cover, they deal with their own family issues, maybe not to this extent, with a conviction and drug addiction at this level. But so many families in Congress and on the campaign trail, they have always confided that they're dealing with issues, challenges with public life.
Weijia, to bring us to the current afternoon, you have sound from one of the jurors who sat on this jury. Tell us what you learned.
That's right, Major. He said that when the jury got the case, they were actually split. They took an initial vote, and it was 6-6. And he wanted to make clear that did not mean 6 of them thought that Hunter Biden was not guilty or innocent. It meant that they, could be convinced that there was reasonable doubt, and that's why they wanted to go through all of the evidence. And then he said today, when they reconvened, because they got the case last night, after they did that and combed through all the documents, all of the texts, when they revisited Hunter Biden's own words, he told me that there was just no question that he was guilty. And he also told me, Major, that this process restored for him a faith in the American justice system. Take a listen.
Well, never sitting on a jury before and deliberating on this case, I could say the judicial system was very fair. Okay? We treated it just like we would any other case. It wasn't about Hunter Biden. It wasn't about his family. It wasn't politically motivated. It was what he did. And the biggest thing that he did was lied about not being a drug addict and not using cocaine and buying a gun.
In fact, Major, this juror told me that President Biden didn't even come up at all during deliberations, that they were solely focused on the facts of this case, not even who the defendant was, but just the evidence before them. And so because they were able to come to this unanimous decision, he said, it was amazing to watch the justice system in action.
And we should just let our audience know that we are respecting the privacy rights of that juror, confirmed member of the jury who did not want to identify himself, but we wanted that insight of the process to go along with it. Weijia, you spend so much time at the White House and talk so frequently to those closest to the president. I want to give you a chance to offer your thoughts on that video that we just showed. I think it's worth showing again, this dramatic video this afternoon of the president with Hunter Biden mere hours after his conviction in a federal court.
Major, anybody who covers President Biden knows how important his family is to him, how, it is part of his inner core, his character of who he is, to be a father, especially to his younger sons who had to go through such a tragedy when they were children, losing their mother, losing their sister. And so, just as we've heard from day one of this trial, Major, the president has leaned into that. He has said every chance he has gotten that he is the president of the United States, but he is also a dad. And he has used these opportunities to say, I'm not going to talk about the case at all, but I do want to stress that I love my son and I am proud of my son. And so he had an opportunity to say that today. He did so in a written statement. And I think it was very calculated, a very important decision for him not to talk about this verbally. Ironically, at the White House, we had gotten his schedule several days prior, and we knew there was an event today on the books about gun control. And this is something that he has worked on for his entire political career. As a senator, as president, trying to reform gun legislation. And even though he gave that speech today, he didn't mention the verdict. He didn't mention his son. He did focus on gun laws. But I will say he did talk about the loss of his other son, Beau, and talking about how he could relate to parents who had lost a child of their own to gun violence. And so this is a very delicate balance, Major, but there is no question how difficult this is for him as a parent.